Are you used to it yet? Because it sure looks good. Don't you guys think this looks great?
It really does look, it's very flattering.
It looks
We
need flattering.
That's playing to the choir.
All right, so I think we should start. Yeah, the cameras are running. I think we should start by just saying, well, Scott's here, so we'll wait till he gets here. But the first question is going to be just tell us your story in 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, 2 paragraphs.
2 paragraphs.
Or less.
Yeah, maybe some of the highlights of your career. And then we can turn it over to these guys and you can ask any question that you like. Does that sound good? And then in terms of length, please get up. The bar's open till 10. I think the snacks are here. And we're going to start a fire at some point. But it's open after that. So this can go as long or as short as you want. So Scott, are you ready?
And please interrupt us. So if you have a question, you don't have to be polite. This is interactive.
Exactly. All right, Ann, why don't we start with you? I'll step out of the way.
Hi, I'm Ann McCormick. My maiden name is Pijstrup, which is pure Danish. And I started the Learning Company in 1978 with a grant of a computer, Apple II Plus, and $1,000 that was initiated by Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs did my first spreadsheet for projecting sales, and he said, the education marketplace is a place, not a market. And that's what we've faced sort of ever since, but we do it anyway. Before that, I was a 5th grade teacher in East Buffalo, and I just felt like something had to happen for those kids. I mentioned earlier, like I had 28 kids and 5 could barely spell their names and couldn't read at all. And they were 13 because they already failed 4 times in regular class. And so what I do is still driven by my kids in East Buffalo. And I did research, I got my doctorate at Berkeley. And then I really wanted to do something that would impact these kids. And I'm just salivating about the idea of reaching millions of kids in countries that are war-torn. That's what drives me. And one investor said, we need somebody who cares about money like you care about learning. And I accept that. I know it's important. So the Learning Company began just with me for 2 years, and then there were 3 of us. We got venture capital offered to us by the Apple Foundation people. Bob Noyce, who invented the computer chip at Intel, was there, and others. And they just came and said, would you like some venture capital? And I said, hey Carolyn, what's venture capital? And what's cash flow? I went to the bank and I said, we need to know your cash flow. And he said, well, I've got a budget. And I didn't know the difference. I was a former nun and 5th grade teacher, and I didn't know those things. But I just kept going because I have a noble goal. And I'm serious about it to this day. So the Learning Company grew up to about 30 people. We had $1 million in sales our first year. The Apple II had 16 colors in high res and no text. And there was no hard drive. We'd have to save to a second floppy disk. One of the wonderful programs that came along was Rocky's Boots. And Warren Robinette created it, but I funded him and encouraged him and let him just work in a pool house and never be bothered until he came in with something that had and or and not gates. And he said, every piece of hardware and software in the world is based on those 3 symbols, on the concept of and or and not. And I thought, kids should know that. So he made a game that 3rd graders could do all of combinatorial and sequential logic and build these amazing machines. It's still on YouTube videos, and it's still available in emulation mode.
And it was fun.
And it was really fun, because Warren was a game designer at Atari. He did Atari Adventure on their VCS machine, so he could just shoehorn things into tiny spaces. That program got us attention. IBM bought our whole product line and doubled our venture capital, the amount we had for venture capital. And we were successful because we marketed through alliances. For the school market, we went to Addison Wesley, who was the market leader in math. They didn't know how to make software, but they knew ours was really good. So their sales force took it, but it had the Learning Company and then a banner that said Addison Wesley, like a shrink wrap thing that would come off. So we built our identity as a brand at the same time as getting distribution. American Express had a campaign to the homes, and they paid to send a little flyer every American Express card holder's home mailer that had the Learning Company software. We were just months old, months from release. And let's see, Simon & Schuster sold it to the bookstores. And we just had all these alliances. And that really worked. I recommend that. I still would do that. Somebody told me I should go to the school market. It's like, yeah, with somebody that's successful in the schools. And the reason that they wanted to do it was good. And they didn't risk their reputation, and it didn't cost them much, and it was great for me. They gave us advances that paid for all development, and we never made a penny on revenue from sales. Because it just paid back the advance. But it got us out there in front of everybody, and it became a household word. And people still say, the Learning Company, I've heard of that. My children grew up on that. Well, they might have meant things later, but we did Reader Rabbit and Rocky's Boots, and there was a kid going to Stanford, and he was a freshman, and he came to my office, the chairman's office. I was chairman and president, and he said, a problem with these, actually my nephew thought of this, who was about 11, you had to go 3 rooms over to get a wire to build your machine. There should be a bag of holding like an adventure game. So we just turned one of the rooms in Warren's Robinette's utility into a bag of holding, and then you could put anything you wanted in it and carry it with you. And this kid at Stanford said, we could make those chips and put chips inside of chips so it was recursive. And we could also make robots, and robots could have all these little things inside of them. And that was Robot Odyssey, and it's probably on YouTube too. It was an astonishing game. But what my role was getting marketing.
And the year was?
1981, I think. Yeah, and I showed it I was asked to show it at Xerox Park, but I had the author show it. And I think Alan Kay was there, who was an Apple Fellow later, and he said, I was looking for the umbilical cord of the mainframe, and he said, that's what let us know that a microcomputer, we thought you needed a microcomputer to do anything. And that showed us that it was possible to use a microcomputer to do something of substance. And then he sold he brought the interface from Xerox Park to Apple that became the Macintosh. And Bill Atkinson was the head developer, and he's still a friend. He saw Reader.With, and he said, you know what's great about it? It will work. That's really a nice, simple statement. Anyway, all the way along the line, because it was helping little children, everybody wanted to help. Somebody did really powerful studies for Pepsi, and they had great data, and they said, we don't want to just sell sugar water, and they just gave me all that information. And it's public now, but every place I went, everybody wanted to help. And people came to me with venture capital, and I accepted it. Every time I got venture capital, people just came to me and offered it. And one of them, I said, I don't have a business plan. I'm not ready to talk to you. And they said, we'll help you with that. We're going to be over in about 20 minutes. You'll be outside, and we're going to come in and get you. And then they Laura Davidow fought with Greylock, who were two fabulous investors.
So this is what happens when you're a hot product in a new market.
Yes.
That the investors come to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, today, 3 people came to me about Reader.With and said that shouldn't be archived. And we have people that might be able to take it global for you. And people that could fund it and everything, so I just have to get rights. And it's not done yet, but I love that stage of potential. And what I say, my advice from all of it is not those details, but if you want to do it, just keep doing it. Iterate. I didn't know a bit from a byte or a cash flow from a budget. And I just did it anyway, and it's fantastic in a company and through companies' associations how you can get everything done. I never learned to program. I had Warren Robinette, why should I program? But I learned to design, and I learned what the machine would do. And I really thought about it. I always wanted it more fun. So one of my advisors was Mark Schlichting. And we've gone a long way together. And
we're still friends.
Yeah, we are.
My story begins a couple of years after that. We started 32 years ago, 1984. We started with the Criterion Collection. Our idea was to do interactive on the new media. And the new media to us was Laserdisc at first. Coming right afterwards was CD-ROM, but before we did CD-ROM, it was on floppy and CD. And it was the idea that you could take things that already existed in the world and add interactivity to it. So we took movies, we took music, we took Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was one of the first CD-ROMs. We took Hard Day's Night was an interactive movie, and in fact the whole Criterion Collection was built on the idea that you could take these great movies and do stuff around them that allowed you to interact with them and to understand them on a deeper level than you could just consume them. And we did it again and again. Most of our stuff was not completely original. It was people taking something that already existed in the world and build things around them to make them interactive. The other element I think that we were fairly unusual in, and I don't see very much of these days, is that we had authors who worked with us. They had an idea, a passion, and they came to us as the publisher, and they would either create something original like Amanda Stories or Rodney Greenblatt, and either it was completely original or they would take something like Robert Winter did with Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and explain it and make it interactive so that you could actually interact with it.
There was a time
Sure.
when we had publishers.
Yes.
It was following the book publishing model.
Yeah.
So there were several publishers, and Voyager was doing this incredible, unique stuff and
Yeah,
cranking
didn't say
out
the
a
name.
lot of it.
Yeah.
That's right, Voyager.
Voyager, yeah.
And just even the Laserdisc, I remember, I think it was Blade Runner. They had Blade Runner, right?
That was Criterion,
That was
yes.
Criterion, and you could go in and you could see the original storyboards, you could see the script.
The
you know.
gouache drawings that they created.
That's right, so anybody who's into film, it was like a gold mine of stuff that you could go back and look at.
Yeah, the Close Encounters, we even made it so that you could do your own ending and your own path through the film. The Criterion Collection is still doing very well, thank you. It's going to have its own streaming channel this fall. And it's still around, it's still doing Blu-ray, it's still doing even ordinary DVDs. And it has, our audience is probably around 1 million people, according to my partner. I don't actually actively work in the company anymore. Most of my energies has been going to Organa, which we founded 20 years ago to do kids media that Criterion didn't want to do. About that time, Criterion got out of interactive, and so we kind of picked up the standard. The first 6 products we did all won international awards, and then CD-ROM did not exist anymore, but CD-ROM, as you know, is the precursor for many of the apps that exist now. And if you go back and look at a lot of those, and there's been a bit of that, people going back and looking at some of those early CD-ROMs, because many of the concepts and the ideas and the interactivity has not been either duplicated or surpassed in all this time.
And the budgets either.
Yes, and the budget.
You didn't just take something and do a little bit with it. It was transformational, so you just go,
A lot of them were, yes.
If you haven't seen Beethoven's Ninth, you really have to play it where you can touch parts of the orchestra and hear them play. You can see the score. It's astonishing.
It was a time when you could come as, I'm loud enough anyway, you could come as, you could have an idea and come to a publisher and pitch it. And then they would market it for you. They might give you programming help.
We did.
Yeah, and that was that way at Roterbund too. People would show up. The Robin and Rand Miller came with Mist, and the Roterbund helped them to it. And the same thing with the guys from Turk when they did Zumbinis.
Yeah,
They could come and everyone. We helped. We helped artists turn their work into interactive media.
The beauty of HyperCard was that people who really weren't programmers could actually create these things that were interactive. I don't know that it has been duplicated exactly, and it's too bad.
It was a personal authoring system.
Yes.
And that was Bill Atkinson that you were
Yes,
talking about.
yes.
He created Mac Paint, original Mac Paint, and some other programs. And when he created HyperCard, Apple marketing wanted to sell it for $250 because it's this whole authoring system. And he held them hostage as the programmer and said, if you do that, I'm just going to put it out on bulletin boards for free for everybody. And so Apple gave it away for free. And teachers were making their own courseware, and it was a lot of fun. And that's how Robin and Rand Miller got into it, is they created a program called Manhole, and then Cosmic Osmo and some other programs.
In about 6 weeks
And Miss-
after
It drove
HyperCard came
video
out.
disc too.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
did. It drove video discs. You could drive a lot of things with it.
Yeah.
We did about 60 interactive laser discs. We did
Wow.
about 80 CD-ROMs, interactive CD-ROMs. I can't even remember the names of all of them now. And I'm currently trying to work on a book about that history. There were several thousand people who came in and out of the company, who were authors, who were fans. People were coming around from around the world to just tour the offices. It was exciting. It was a very exciting time. And I don't think we have the same kind of excitement now, and that's kind of a shame because things are transforming, but it's not quite the same.
There were 100,000 Apple IIs anywhere on Earth when I started the Learning Company. And there were no PCs, zero, and no iPads, and no iPhones, and no anything like that. It was 16K was the Apple II that shipped with no hard drive and no, big floppies that just took a teeny tiny little thing.
So I went off and lived on a commune after college, and but we were called the farm. It was a big community, and we went out. We were going to change the world, and that was what we wanted to do. And we had a midwifery school, and we were vegetarians, and we worked in the third world with Mother Teresa and other people. And same thing as you. We just wanted to go out and make a difference, and we just figured, a bunch of long hairs, we could go do these things. And then, 8 years of doing that, and we realized, well, the community wasn't going exactly where we wanted to, and so my wife and I stepped off, and we were in San Francisco, and I became a building contractor after having been the art director at the community for years. Anybody knows the book Spiritual Midwifery? I was the art director for that book. And what?
Maybe birth story, didn't that take place?
That took place there, yes. With Ina Gaskin, yeah. And so I went back and studied animation at San Francisco State Traditional Animation, and I tried to get hired at a place downtown in San Francisco doing animation, and they said, oh, we just finished a project, but I need a wall built. And I said, well, I can do that, and I built a wall for them, and that was for it was a commercial for an early 3D company, and I worked my way onto a bunch of early 3D modeling, heavy-duty systems, and then not knowing anything about computers, but I told them I was an art director, and we might want to buy their system, and they said, oh, sure. And then I was late to computers. I was so late, I felt like, well, I've already missed the boat. But I bought a Mac, a used Mac. It wasn't even a Plus, it was just the first Mac, the 512. It was a 512, it was like really, and but I did a bunch of drawings and I sent it out, and I got hired doing illustrations for Carmen Sandiego, and other companies hired me to do all kind of weird formats, and I did that at night and worked my day job. And then I'd had this idea. In fact, I was an apparent with the Nintendo guilt, because my boys my middle son particularly was really into the early Nintendo games and the console, and he and a friend or two friends would go and they'd rent a game, no manual because it came from a game store and they didn't have manuals anymore, and they would figure out how to get there, and 3 hours later they were on the 52nd level of the game. And I'm thinking, I know what it's like trying to get these kids to do 10 minutes of homework. And here they are cooperating for 3 hours, one kid playing, two watching. And it was like a technotrope, like a heliotrope, the way the flowers follow the sun. Kids are following the technology. And I'm going, man, I need to make something for my kids that has that draw, but also has real content. It's not just hollow calories. And that's where the idea of interactive storybooks came up. And I got myself hired at Broderbund because I was unknown designer trying to talk a company into spending millions of dollars on a market that was non-existent, which was CD-ROM. Because I wanted more audio, I wanted more animation, and I didn't want to build it 7 times like they were doing with Carmen, one for every platform. And so I got myself into the company, and it was really interesting because it was my first corporate job, and my wife said, if you don't like it, you can quit. And I said, well, okay, we'll see what it's like, you know, having lived on the commune for years. But in community, you have to work it out. It's by agreement. And it turns out I had a PhD in community management that I didn't realize that I'd gotten. And I got into the software company, and it was like kindergarten. It was like easy to do what I wanted. I just did what I wanted and apologized later. And I made them millions and millions of dollars because of that. Because they didn't understand what I was doing. And they had just turned down Tetris. You know? They came to the company, it went through everybody's hands, and then they said, no, I don't think this is going to work, you know. So, you know, they didn't really quite get me, and even when I talked them into letting me create a prototype, and with a pre-version of what became Director. There was no manual, but because I could program it myself with the help of a couple of people in the office.
VideoWorks.
Yeah.
VideoWorks, it was called VideoWorks Interactive, yeah. They didn't have to spend money for a programmer to touch it, so I was able to animate it myself. Anyway, I got to a point where Philips Corporation came through the building, and they were building a big set-top box to go on top of your TV to play CD-ROMs, and they saw my prototype, and they gave us $500,000 to build them one title. So all of a sudden, my group of me had funding, and we were sort of off into the races of trying to figure out how to turn a CD-ROM drive, which had a minute seek, into a player, and which we did figure out, and it all had to play in 2 meg of RAM. But it was very interesting just dealing with corporate life and coming from those kind of situations. And then anybody who's built with the larger companies, is that the same people who were, I'd have heads of division stop me in the hallway, and they'd go, I don't get it. I don't get it. You click on it and something happens? I don't get it. They were just like, they're just rude to me, and I'd be all like, oh yeah, it's wonderful, it does this, it does that. And they go, nah. And then when we became a revenue center, they all tried to own it. Yes. They all tried to say how they were part of it, and it was amazing how, at first, in community, when you wanted to do something, you had to create a shared vision about it. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we built a solar house? And then you get people that, yeah, kind of like that, and then you get people helping you do it. You have to create a vision of what it is that you want to build. So you're kind of a salesperson, and that's what you do in the company. But once it became a revenue center, then I had to fight everybody off to not try and take it away from me, which happened over and over and over again. And they tried to move me out of the division, and then there was an opportunity to try and get Dr. Seuss. I was lucky to get to work with Arthur before there was a TV show. I brought Mark Brown his first multimedia computer, and went to his house and showed him the prototype we were working on. And Dr. Seuss was kind of the holy grail for us, and I had never even assumed that we could even get it. So the opportunity it wasn't at Random. The digital rights weren't at Random House. And her lawyers, Mrs. Seuss's lawyers, were out shopping it around, and all these other companies, Microsoft and everybody, was trying to get a hold of it. And the opportunity came to do a pitch to her, and my boss said, well, you shouldn't go, I'm going to go do this. And he went and gave the pitch to her among 4 other pitches that day, or 5, and she fell asleep in the middle of his talk. She was old and elderly, and she's still around, actually. So a few weeks later, Alberto Vitale, the head of Random House, comes and says, we want to do it again, can we pitch again? So this time they let me go, and we went down to La Jolla to meet with Mrs. Seuss. And we come into the room, and it's all lawyers from her intellectual property lawyers, and they're all wearing these gray polo shirts. And everybody else, especially the people from New York, all come in wearing black suits. And the guys from LA go, what, somebody die? You know, they're already messing with him, you know. And so I'm giving a little pitch about, you know, what we could do with Dr. Seuss and how fun it would be. And I mocked up a version of Kid Picks with all Seuss stickers and stuff. And then I told the story about how when I was a kid, what I had always wanted to do was to go inside the pages of Horton Hears a Who and play with the weird instruments in Whoville. I'd always look at them and go, damn, that's weird. I'd like to play with that, you know. And I'm telling this story, and she gets up out of her chair, and she walks around the table, and she takes my elbow, and she's this tall, and she lifts me up out of my chair, and she turns to her lawyers and says, I've changed my mind. I want to work with him, and we're going to go to lunch now if you'd like to join us. And she took my arm and led me out of the building, and the head of Random House was going, yes, you know. And then Random House bought half of my company, from Broderbund, and all my bosses who were always trying to manipulate me now were equal with me. And I was liberated, and we moved to new headquarters, and we did, because it was a new market, and because, you know, it's just like we are now, or we were with apps a few years ago, we did 30 million a year for 5 or 6 years. And then everybody jumped in because it was a big revenue stream, and Disney particularly is the one who kills markets because they'll spend as much as they want to own a share of the market, and if they don't get it, then they kill you, just like they just did with
Disney Infinity.
Disney Infinity. And one Christmas in 80, 97, 96, they had every egghead store had 6 full standing displays of their products. And everybody else was trying to cash in, and the whole market collapsed in 1 year.
Yeah, at that time we had good analysts, and there were 2,700 kids' apps on the shelves, and you needed physical shelf space.
Yeah.
And 6 were breaking even, and 4 of those were Disney.
Yes.
You know, I don't know, there's Ariel Princess that year, and
The Lion King was the one that made all the money.
terrible apps. They
They
were
were terrible
creativity centers that were all the same app, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
I just want to add, though, that a friend of Mark's worked with me, and I got to meet him. I was so excited to meet Mark. And I got to go to a party at his really pretty office in San Francisco, and Mrs. Dr. Seuss was there.
Audrey.
Yeah. And she had this gigantic diamond like I've never seen. And of course, it would have been glass on anybody else. It was really fun to see this little person that loved you.
Yeah, she was fun. I got to actually go and have lunch with her a couple times in her house, just her and I. And she's talking, and she says, well, you know, whenever I have a question, I just ask Ted. And right about over here where Renee was an urn with his ass. I go, oh, you know.
Oh, I don't know if I like being
Well, wasn't
there.
only that far away.
Okay.
Only that far away. So yeah, it was interesting times. But I think that what applies for what happened to each of us is that we were in a time where you're in a new market, and there's this huge opportunity to just be creative. And if you just take it and run with it, you're going to have success until the market saturates. And we're sort of in that saturation now. We have to invent the next piece. And
Well, it
it's a way.
also shows that selling with passion is so important, and having that enthusiasm and that belief.
Yeah.
Suits don't have it.
Suits don't get it.
I did want to say one thing. There is, if I have one word of wisdom, there are 3 parts to the new media and succeeding. One is the idea, getting a really great idea. One is the doing of it, and doing it really, really well, so it really is magic. And the third part, if you really want success, you have to figure out a business model that works. And there are lots of different business models, and you have to be careful not to be taken over by somebody who's doing it for their own purposes.
Because they'll do it.
Yes, and those 3 parts are very, very separate, and you can really succeed at one and not one of the others. But that doesn't mean you didn't succeed, because you can succeed at one of them and forget about the others.
When you were in the middle of it, like in that, the height of success, did you realize the impact on the industry that you had with Living Brooks and Broderbund, with Voyager, with the Learning Company? Like, when did you realize the impact that you would have on the industry as a whole?
Well, people kept saying, you're going to be very rich. And I'm not sure that ever came true. But on the other hand, and I said, well, we don't really care about that. What we care about is that we love what we're doing. And I think that, being true to that vision was all that mattered. And yes, with Criterion, we knew that we were changing everything for home video.
We knew
did.
we're having an impact.
Yes, we had an impact, and it has made a difference.
I was in about 300 articles a year. I was in Fortune Business Week, Psychology Today, on and on and on. And the president of Lucasfilm came to visit me, and he said, now what could I do for you? And I said, I want to come and visit you. And he was like so taken aback because they didn't let people in. And he said, well, I want to know what you're going to do besides being wildly successful. And the company was sold for $660 million. It was started with a computer and $1,000 that were a gift. And my stock went to like thousands and thousands of times their value. But because of the takeovers, I punted and said, I just can't deal with the learning being taken out of it. So I was kicked out of the company in 1985 and sold every share of stock. And the guy buying it said, Ann, only sell half. I'm going to make this successful. And it's like, I don't want to even hear about it. Well, that lost me, $30 million of my share. But you know what? I don't care. I still did what I wanted to do. I did a virtual reality company with Jaron Lanier for a few years, and that was wild. I was like running away to join the circus. And there was another thing about that time. I'll tell you when I think of it. Oh, that time. This time now feels more like 1995, when there were. Somebody at Stanford Business School told me this, and I wish I could write it down for you, but I'll try to say it. There's an up and a flat, and an up and a flat, and an up and a flat. And we're in that now. We're in, that keeps happening. Well, it started with an Apple II. There's a lot of promise for it, very little market, but it rises, and right at about an inch before the end of the up curve, we get investment. Then the instead of a big floppy, a little floppy comes out. You can do 6,700 times as much on the little floppy. So we don't know quite what to do with it. Nobody has the drives yet. And the market goes flat while we figure it out. And the investors sell you down the river. To anybody, just remainder you and it's over. Then that starts to take off. The hockey puck, or no, hockey stick goes back up again. Then the hard drive comes out and it goes flat, and I forget which order that was. Then, again, we got funded right before the end of that upturn because look at that pattern, and of course they project it continuing indefinitely. But the flat points were the small diskette, the hard drive, then CD-ROM, then internet. And now it's the iPad and iPhone, and it's this rise, but we've just hit that flat time. And people give up because it isn't rising like it was before. But if you've seen it about 6 times, we recognize that period. Yeah. So that's a big pattern.
You just keep paddling and wait for the next wave.
Yeah.
I've had the same experience as Ann, is where I was probably 2.5 years from being a carpenter, and I was speaking at the Smithsonian and Stanford University and Forbes magazine and Newsweek.
Yeah.
And I'm going, just a carpenter, it's like, what am I doing here? But here's one of the leaders of multimedia, and I'd always have to laugh about it because, we knew that we were just having to be playing with the new technology, and for a while it was hard, and so it was a rare opportunity.
Get a CEO because I really didn't care about money like I should. And I'm not analytical and linear like somebody should be in that role, and I understood that. But he got annoyed when I just saw everybody. Like, this young woman came in who was a teacher aide. Well, who would take time for a teacher aide who's the chairman of a company? Well, it turned out to be Leslie Grimm, who had Rocky's boots up her sleeve. And I helped shape it and make it better, but it's her program. It was the second bestseller of all time for about 10 years. But one time he said to me...
And she went on to create a bunch of other programs.
Which
we sold.
Yeah, she did. One of my favorite moments was that I was going to see this guy that had called me from Washington, D.C., and the president of the learning company said, who are you seeing now? And I said, somebody from the special office of the president. And he said, the president of what? The United States. That kind of stuff happened constantly. 15 countries brought me to, like, I got to go to Finland and help reshape the education in Finland. I've been to Brazil. Somebody right now wants me to join a company that's just gone public with 300 programmers in China. There's just constant opportunity. And what I'm better at now is determining whether our purposes are aligned. And I think someone else said that today. Oh, Bjorn said that about when he chose someone to buy the company. And I thought, wow, it's so important to get that alignment if you ever do have to sell out.
Totally.
Because I settled because I couldn't pay the rent or I couldn't pay the people. So I would take somebody where I was just going, this isn't right. And I did it anyway, and it was just disaster. Like for untold horror. So if your guts are telling you, don't do it, think of some way to not do it. You know, being bought out.
Yep. When I was first trying to start Living Books, they were giving me, they begrudgingly gave me some people to work on my staff, and they gave me the people that nobody else wanted to work with. The people who were the hassles and
unmanageable.
Well, yeah, or didn't like computers. They had an old Disney artist who worked on Snow White, and he hated working on the computer, and they gave him to me, and I had him draw on paper.
Sure.
And we did a whole program where I couldn't
says it all.
he just was totally in love with it, and a lot of that. But the other part of it, I think, was you're talking about. There's a point where once we were out and everyone could tell that we were doing something good and we were doing something from our heart and we were doing something the teachers loved it. You know, you have advocates who are out selling it for you, as you were both saying.
Absolutely.
And those advocates are really important. And then all of a sudden, I started getting people wanting to come work for me. And I was having somebody who's, they're calling me from Canada. Well, I have a master's degree in child psychology and I'm an animator. Can I come draw for you? Well, I can't pay you a lot, but it's like, but we had a team full of people who were passionate about what we were doing, and that made it a lot more fun.
Yeah, the passion is more important than what their credentials are. We kind of specialized in people completely changing what they had been doing, because if it's a new media, there really isn't a lot of experience you might have, but we really were more important. We were looking more importantly at their passion and what they wanted to do and what they were willing to learn than what their credentials were. And it worked very well.
Yeah, let's see if people have questions.
We want to let you guys go here.
I want to tell a fast story.
Yep.
I met all of three of these guys through their work, and I just was looking at their stuff. So I was reviewing all 40 of the CD-ROM or the floppy disks in, for a master's project, and
You came to see us.
Yeah, about 4 of them were from the Learning Company. So I was, I knew who was doing the good work, and so there was a summit at Stanford, the software summit.
Oh yeah,
remember
that's
that?
right. Yeah.
And I was flat broke, and I think it was in late 80s kind of thing. So the email had just been invented, so I put out an email like, I don't know where to stay, I can't afford a hotel, and I want to come to this software summit. Is there any options? And I got this email back from McCormick. She said, you can stay at my house.
Which is a 20 by 30 foot cottage. It's like nothing.
I didn't know that. I said, McCormick, Learning Company, $30 million. Yeah! Hot tub, California.
But it was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I'm from Michigan. So I get there and we go to this.
Did I have a bed at that time?
Yeah. So I was in the guest room, right? So we go up to this beautiful place. It's a small house, very rustic.
It's a Norwegian summer camp.
Yeah,
full of
right.
Cottages.
It
I
wasn't
live in a Norwegian summer.
Yeah.
place.
Does it have a hot tub?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, it has to have a hot tub.
course.
Anyway, so I was in the guest room, and when you're in someone's guest room, what do? You snoop.
Now he
I never told this. This is the first time this is out. So I'm snooping around. I said, there's this bookshelf. And I'm like, because you're going to what are you going to do? Go to bed?
No.
They didn't have podcasts and stuff to listen to, no Netflix. So I was like, I'm going to go check, there's some binders over there. I'm going to check them out. So I started going through them.
Really?
Yeah. Heck yeah. and I found the code to Rocky's boots. The actual code. And I was like,
That's right.
oh my gosh, this is the code. I was so excited.
That's very cute.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, a children's
Only you
museum,
are.
Children's Creativity Museum wants all my archive of design notes and
Yeah.
code and all those things. I had a notebook of the solutions for Rocky's boots, and for years, kids called me up and said, I can't get past that last game. So I'd tell them the solution
And
or a clue.
One more fast story of
Can you share some backstory of Rocky's boots? Don't mean to cut you off, but for those that don't know.
Yeah, Warren Robinette was at Atari making a venture, which is if you were on the screen, there were like walls written on the edge and drawn on the edge, and there were little doors. And if you went out this door, you were off the screen, but you were in another room. And so there were, a whole bunch of rooms. And he made a graphics utility that we called the utility. This was the most important to us. And it had about 35 rooms that were laid out, and I told about how there were pictures of an and or a not gate, and you could put them together to make machines that had effectors and detectors, words I learned from him. But little 7-year-olds could learn to, he said, make every piece of hardware and software in the world with those 3 symbols. Well, and I thought little kids should learn that. And later I had a 2nd grader who was at MIT, and he said, nobody else gets and or not. And we had a moving truth table. It was like green things, purple things, green and purple things, and neither green nor purple things. And he said, could you send me Rocky's boots, because I need it for the other kids at MIT. They're just such fun things like that. But it was...
where'd the name come from?
He wanted to make Rocky Raccoon. He liked Rocky Raccoon, but he was going to
The
have
Beatles song. The Beatles song?
No, it was Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Oh, from okay.
Yeah.
There's a bit you've never...
And we
There
were
we are.
sued by the Rocky Boot Company in Ohio.
So Warren Robinette made the first Easter egg. That's right. He's, if you look him up in Wikipedia, he's the first Easter egg, and he's in Walter Isaacson's book and so on. And Industrial Magic #1, I don't know if you remember, Darren, there were 20 people that came. And one of them was this doctor from Georgia, physician from Georgia. And we didn't know who he was. We knew who everybody was, except this one guy. We didn't know. It was a Warren somebody. And I was interested because of his name, Warren. And yeah, North Carolina.
Gotta stick close
And
together.
so he stood up, and we were doing the introduction.
With his drawl.
And I was in my dress, and I was taking the role, of course, because Anor chickened out. Yeah, I took it. You have to be there. Yeah, and I pointed at him. I said, "Who are you, young man?" And he said, "I'm Warren Robinette." And they went like this. That's Warren Robinette. Oh my gosh, that was really
Yeah.
cool.
And I didn't know who he was, but
He was
talked a
incredible.
bunch, and then I think it was just a couple of years ago. I read Ready Player One in the book. The beginning, he's referenced.
Yeah, he's still in it.
Easter
He
egg.
calls
He's
me
like
out.
The beginning of the whole thing is Warren Robinette, and I'm like, I know this guy.
So he went on to be a physician?
No, he's, I think he's in research at IBM. He was, or HP, Advanced Development.
Oh, I thought it was
Oh,
a
and
doctor.
when I did my first virtual reality, Jaron Lanier made his first virtual reality. He was at NASA, and he made a jet fuel simulation that you could grab it was real data that would repeat and repeat. So there was a spiral, and if you flew it, we made a glove, not me, but my team had a glove, and you could fly to the center of this giant jet fuel simulation. Then you could stand back from it and fly away and see it tiny. But you could reach out and turn it, and it was like grabbing the fabric of the universe.
Yes, I
I
did.
got to go to the Muppet Mansion with Chris Cerf, who really loved our work. He was also did Between the Lions.
Love Chris.
And he's such a wonderful
So
guy.
awesome.
And anyway, I met Jim Henson, and I said, I'm so honored to meet you. And he said, Ann, I'm so honored to meet you too. It's like, it's really nice.
So as old timers, we can go on and talk forever and ever, and I want to leave room for everybody else to either
Yeah.
ask us questions or to get on and do some
What
other
are you
stuff
interested
together.
in?
What are you interested in? Any questions, or should we play games or do something else? Okay, we got one question back here.
I was just curious, we spoke about earlier outside of your conversation when you're an animator. Just out of curiosity, what did you use to animate? Like, what was the process? What did you use?
I'm loud. We were,
Repeat the question, please.
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
originally, we had our own animation programs, and we would animate frame by frame in little boxes, and the programmers would build it. And if it was running too slow, they'd just throw a frame out, and then everybody would limp, And when I did Living Books, I said I'm gonna let the animators drive the program, not the programmers, for that reason. But that's until we got to where we were able to use director and stuff.
Yeah,
Janine
Warren
has a
had
story.
his own utility to do all the animation. It was just brilliant.
Janine, you have a story? Microphone, the portable microphone just died.
Oh, it's died?
Okay, so I think the remarkable thing about these people is their passion. That's what drove the whole thing. They've all said, I didn't know what I was doing, but I wanted to do this, And I think they really need to be applauded for that, because I think passion drives a lot of us, and that it's one of the most important factors in developing an important program. My passion was reading. I started with the Apple IIe. I wanted to have sound to go with these dumb floppy disks. So we figured out a way to Velcro a tape recorder to the side of the Apple IIe and cue it to what was happening on the disk so that it would talk, because my whole thing is about talking. So the first iteration of Talking Fingers was that, and then I met Leslie Grimm, who Anna's talked about, who has such a big heart, and she said, I love this program. This program is really important. She said, let's go to Broderbund and see if they'll help us get it started. So we went to Broderbund for a couple of months, and it just didn't work. For some reason, they didn't understand what we wanted to do, and it was...
They didn't see themselves as the kids going.
Yeah. So we're walking out of Broderbund one day, and I'm practically in tears, and I'm saying, it's just not going to work, Leslie. She said, I'll fund it. Let's do it together. And she did. She put $600,000 into that program, and she and her partner, Jeremy Guiding, worked for 2 years to help build the CD-ROM for that program. And that was really the start of everything. But it was just so interesting to be at the beginning and hear all these other stories. But another part of that story is that at one point, the head of NICHD, National Institute of Child Health, had funded me to do the CD-ROM version, and he invited me to Washington because he wanted to convince President Bush of the importance of technology and how technology could be used in education. And it was Education Week, and we were supposed to have an interview with Bush on Wednesday, and I arrived in Washington on Monday, 9/11. Oh. And that was the end of the interview with the president.
The Learning Company published it.
What?
The Learning Company published it.
The Learning Company published Read, Write, and Type 3 months before the big takeover. And from then on, it just got buried in a lot of takeovers and yeah.
And Leslie made her money at the Learning Company because she was smart enough to not sell her spot.
And don't sell your rights either. That's what we found out with Living Books. Is even one of the stories is my own story, Harry in a Haunted House. And when we got taken over, it all got buried. And then it was, got passed from company to company. It got bought by the company that bought the Learning Company. They changed their name to the Learning Company to make themselves sound good.
Softkey.
Then they sold Softkey, and then they sold all of it to Mattel for $2.2 billion. All these soft
3.5.
Books, good cookbooks, really.
with cookbooks, yeah.
Kevin O'Leary, the guy that was in charge of this whole takeover, is now the shark on Shark Tank. He's a real shark.
And it was your biggest loss in economic history because 4 months later it was remaindered for $1 million, and all of it was sold to Houghton Mifflin.
For $1.
No, it was
River Deep.
$1,000, wasn't it?
It was
It was
$1.
$1,000.
$1, and they get half the proceeds of whatever they sell.
Oh, man. And I could never get Rocky's Boots rights because I wanted to put it out again, but it was lost somewhere in the guts of
buried.
Houghton Mifflin.
They were all lost.
Yeah, they were all buried and it went to River Deep, and then River Deep bought Houghton Mifflin, and are now everybody who works for Houghton Mifflin was River Deep, and and there are so many things that are buried in there. I was telling somebody that Broderbund had me and my programmer. We had a patent for living text.
Oh
So
my
if
gosh.
you clicked on a word and it highlighted and said the word, I had the patent on that.
I owe you
And
one.
that's right, you know, and
Blue words.
but you know, it was one of those kind of things that we were never going to actually try and get that. It would be terrible karma to do that, I think. But there's patents buried in there that they don't even know about because companies just got rolled up, and
It was a huge amount of fun
let's
though.
let these guys go.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the three of you were competitors, and also Jan Davidson, who was, her story
Yeah.
is quite remarkable. Math blaster, a teacher with a husband who had a strong business background, built the company, Davidson and Associates, and into Knowledge Adventure, and Bill Gross bought that company, and they sold it to Mattel, or they sold it to Sendent for
Crazy money.
A lot of money.
It was over $1 billion. $1 billion.
Oh,
with
Play
an
money,
E.
yeah.
I visited her at Lake Tahoe and she was so nice to me. I visited your office and I visited your office way back then when we weren't anybody, but we found each other anyway. It was really fun, just as we know each other, all of us.
Thank you for listening to us
Yeah.
tell old stories.
Thank you, guys.